Hi, I'm Dee co-director of the Center for Play Therapy at the University of North Texas, and welcome to Ray's Research Corner. Today, I'm going to talk about the two basic approaches to research, which are qualitative and quantitative. So quantitative is exactly what you would think. Quantitative, numbers. So when we use numbers in our research, we're typically doing quantitative research. Qualitative is more about how do you capture voices, populations, dynamics, processes in the research that you're doing. So they're very different ways to come at research. They are both equally important. What you will find is that quantitative is prioritized more highly when you're talking about evidence-based practices. So typically we're looking at how does an intervention work with large numbers of people, and then we can kind of come up with yes it does or no it doesn't. And that's usually the kind of questions that quantitative answers is yes or no. It gives you a particular answer, like a multiple choice test about like what is the outcome of this thing, and I'm going to ask a bunch of people or test a bunch of people, and I'm going to find out about this particular thing I want to find out. Qualitative, very different in that what we try to do is capture different kinds of basically qualitative data, and what that means is what is happening during processes. So especially if we're talking about intervention research, qualitative research looks at what are the voices of the people who are participating in the intervention, how are they experiencing the intervention. Also in qualitative for intervention, we'd be looking at what is the viability of the intervention. Is it something that people are going to continue to come to? Does it seem impactful for them? It also will talk about what has been the impact for participants. The difference would be when we do quantitative, we are looking again, like I said, for an answer for yes, this intervention worked, but what we're missing is how did it work? And there are more advanced quantitative techniques we can do to do a little bit of that. But what we don't get is like, what is your participant's voice in the process? What's happening for them in the process? And qualitative in intervention really gives us that. But what qualitative doesn't answer is, was it effective? It's going to answer, how was it experienced by people who participated in the intervention? What was going on for them during the intervention? Those questions, which are really important questions that we try to answer, particularly by looking at themes of what was going on qualitatively during an intervention. So they're looking at two different things. Quantitative is going to answer a question. Qualitative is going to expound upon a question. It's going to give us even more questions to ask because it really is getting at a more complex level of looking at intervention. So when you're reading about quantitative and qualitative, one of the things you really want to look at is, first of all, qualitative can never answer the question, was this intervention effective? So you really want to make that as a rule for yourself as you're reading. So it really is nice to see that 8 to 10 participants had this wonderful experience in an intervention, and we learn a lot about, what was it like for them? How did they experience it? All of that. But what it does not tell us is, was it effective for a general population? So it would be great if an intervention was effective for 8 people, but we would never take that out and generalize it to be like, well, then this intervention must be effective. Those kind of questions are really answered by quantitative data. So that's when you're like, okay, well, they looked at 50 participants and they compared 25 to 25, and they found these 25 did not get better who weren't getting intervention, and these 25 did get better. That answers that question. So a lot of times when you're reading, I think that can be confusing. And recently I've been reading some qualitative reports in journals and peer-reviewed journals where they go out too far in saying, oh, well, this was an effective intervention. And you just want to never walk away from a qualitative study with a yes or no answer. You want to walk away with a more complex way of looking at the intervention. And so what I really want to encourage you to do for Ray's Research Corner is, when you are reading quantitative and qualitative, really understand the importance of each of them and how they serve two different purposes and how we need both of them, and how we're going to try and integrate those things to really understand what's happening in our play therapy interventions. And I think I'll talk more in another Ray's Research Corner about the more particulars about what happens in qualitative and quantitative, but this just gives you an overview about looking at those two different approaches. So thanks for joining, and I'll see you soon.